Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I'm here this lovely Monday morning with David, and we are excited to start off the month of May and this powerful week with you. We are exploring what it means to leave a spiritual legacy, and this is on the tails of last week's episode and the week before, so if you didn't hear the last 2 weeks, maybe pause and come back to us. We were talking about birth 2 weeks ago, death last week, and now we're talking about leaving a spiritual legacy. And the emphasis of the last few weeks is really understanding the process that the soul goes through, that there is a journey that we're on. And in a way, we talked about birth, we talked about death, and now we're really going to be talking about life, what it means to live a life that has impact, that makes a difference, and how to use our energy efficiently and accurately so that we are leaving the world a better place than it was when we entered it. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast where David and I and our guests aim to provide our listeners with the most powerful and practical tools to help you navigate the coming 7 days. We do that by exploring the wisdom and tools of Kabbalah, and every week we end up sharing life lessons and practical tools that can help you any day of your life, any year of your life. And this week is no different. A lot of questions came up from the past couple of weeks because we talked about things, situations and instances that leave an indelible impact on the life of an individual. And we received a lot of feedback, people asking questions. Well, this is what my mindset was when I had kids, when my parents had me, this is what was going on. And one of the things I think is important to bring to the forefront of everybody's awareness is that because our world is predominantly metaphysical, it's more spiritual than it is physical. The Kabbalists use the 99% versus 1% ratio to help us understand that the spiritual realm is much more influential than the physical realm is. Our teacher, Rav Berg, used the example of when your hand is making a shadow on the wall, most people try to move the shadow, which is trying to manipulate the physical reality. Whereas if we tried to move our hand, which is the spiritual realm, the shadow would move as well. And thinking about whether you're on a spiritual journey now for a week, for a few minutes, for days, for decades, whatever it is, the reality is that the universe is constantly trying to enlighten us to the impact of our actions. And a situation came up recently, and I would be interested, David, in hearing what you have to say about this. A student brought a situation in her life to my attention, and she was asking, what am I supposed to do? And she was able to see definitely how throughout her life she had been given different chances to make a shift, to create a change. And rather than dealing with the situation, she avoided it, she denied it, she repressed it, she ran from it, she got busy doing something else. Now it's a building burning and it can't wait another minute to work on. And I shared with her that the first realization in order to help the situation is to realize we needed it. Our actions, our words, our thoughts necessitated that scenario. And with that total acceptance, then you can change it. But the first step in that acceptance is understanding I am so much more powerful than I want to admit. I can, with my thoughts and my words and my actions, I move mountains. I change lives. I change my own life. I change the course of history. And from that place, I can take that strength and I can use it to make a difference, to make an impact, whether it's in my own lives, my family's life, or the world, depending on the sphere of influence that you're focusing on. So how can we be more mindful in those situations when opportunities come to us and we can do something?
What do you mean by we can do something?
Like, again, I always think of Spider-Man and you can run from your responsibility or you can accept it and use it for good. But I think each human being has that own awakening or has the opportunity to have their own awakening to realize how powerful they are and how much they need to take that power seriously, because we make a difference. We make a difference whether we want to or not. And we get to decide if that difference is positive or not.
Well, I do want to first address when you start to talk about the wisdom of Kabbalah. And for all of our listeners, we have new listeners every week who don't know what Kabbalah is. And part of what Elisheva and I try to do on our podcast is to remove any of the misnomers about this being something that's only for, this wisdom being something that's only for a small group of people. Kabbalah is a spiritual, universal wisdom that's dealing with the energy of our world, and as well as the laws of the universe for the soul to be able to receive this energy in the world. And what Kabbalah speaks a lot about is consciousness. This idea that what you see in your physical world is a manifestation of what you create in the spiritual world, and how we control our thoughts and our desires, and how to act or react when painful situations come up. It encompasses pretty much every facet of life and gives us the rule book of how to live life in order to receive miracles, which is our birthright. To receive miracles, receive fulfillment, to feel a sense of control and happiness and joy. That's the birthright of every soul. But unfortunately, we often go through life in a very reactive way, and we're just grabbing at sparks of light, as opposed to what we call connection to the light of the Creator from the source, which then manifests physically in this world as all the great things that we're looking for. So the second thing I wanted to address after the example that Elisheva said is, one of the things that I've learned from our lineage of great teachers and from the writings of the Kabbalists is that anything you're experiencing in your life has to do with what you believe. What you believe. And this world will always be limited to you, and you will not be able to see the why of what you're going through if your belief about this world is limited. And so I'll share an example. One of the things that the writings of the great Kabbalists share is that time is an illusion, that the past and the future exist in this moment. And we hear a lot about this. A lot of people talk about this concept, and so we need to double down on it. This idea that technically you can see what will happen in the future right now if you were tapped in to this reality. This conscious reality, the being present. So one of the things I try to do is realize, hey, the challenges that I'm going to go through in life, I'm going to go through them. They are coming because they exist in the future. But how many of these challenges can I, it kind of reminds you of like these shows where there's a mole, like in the FBI or in the police department. And so the bad guys always get tipped off that there's a raid coming or an arrest coming, so they can kind of flee the scene before the raid happens. And in many ways, before there's a raid on you from the negative forces of this world, you can get tipped off. What I try to do every morning, and this is why we set time to pray. And again, prayer is not something religious. I hate when people take it in that way. Prayer is a connection to see the future. So that's the way I look at it. When I sit down and I talk out loud to the universe, to the Creator, to the light, I'm trying to understand when the raid is coming. I'm trying to understand what the future is going to look like and what seeds I can plant differently right now to recreate the future. So this is why we allot time in the morning. I do, Elisheva does, Elisheva's husband does. We all set some time in the morning to listen to the future. And if you believe that you can hear the future, you will start to hear it. You will start to see things. You will start to feel things. You will start to maybe all of a sudden realize that you have some kind of ego. You'll start to realize that maybe you have some kind of anger. You'll feel the anger at that moment. And what does that mean? It means that the universe is telling you, hey, or you might start having negative thoughts when you pray. So what does that mean? It's the Creator saying, hey, these negative thoughts are going to blossom into a raid later on. Let's deal with them now. I'm giving you the opportunity so you can see the future at this moment. So I like this approach of proactive spirituality. Technically, we can always see the challenges that are coming, and we don't have to just be responding when they come.
What I love about what you said is that it's actually in this week's Zohar portion, this section that correlates to this week's energy. The Zohar has this.
The Zohar is the main text of the Kabbalist that
right.
decodifies the Bible.
That's really where we get the majority of the insights that we share every week are really from the Zohar. And it talks this week about how humanity was created for good. And not only for good, but really to transform and elevate everything. And that's one of the unique gifts that humanity has over the other kingdoms, is that we can choose good over evil, light over darkness. The rest of nature, of the natural world, whether it's animals or vegetation, they're either running on instinct, which is definitely inclined to elevate, whether it's preservation, the circle of life, etc. We're the only ones who really wrestle with, should I or shouldn't I? What am I going to get out of it? We're the ones who have the ability to rationalize and calculate, which can be very important and very powerful. As David was saying, we get to choose if we follow the tip or if we ignore it, but it can also be our downfall. And the Zohar says really powerfully in this week's Zohar, that we have the responsibility, in a way. We have the gift of seeing something dark and being able to transform it into light, seeing a challenge and turning it into an opportunity for growth, seeing a conflict even, and using it as an opportunity to create unity and togetherness rather than separation and fragmentation. And it reminds me of, there's a lot of work out there. Oh, I don't know if you want to call it in psychology or sociology, modern thought that talks about the power and the importance of vulnerability, that there is maybe a cultural shift that there was, at least in the modern world or decades ago. It was about being strong, about showing, stiff upper lip, projecting this infallible persona, and now it's more about vulnerability. And what's interesting to me about that vulnerability conversation is that the enemy of vulnerability is shame, that we don't want to be exposed to, we don't want people to see we're damaged goods or that we're unlovable or unworthy. And that whole conversation is also really woven into the whole story of humanity, of creation, that Adam and Eve, metaphorically speaking, again, we're talking about the 99% part of it, which is a whole energetic explanation. They were created as perfect and complete, and with the whatever choice they made that started the whole physical reality business, you want to call it like that, there's a lot of shame and guilt and blame wrapped up in that story, which is always at the core of why we don't step up, why we don't take the opportunity to reveal light. And in the conversation that I shared about a little bit earlier, it was it revolved around a mom who was feeling like she had damaged her kids. And this is something I probably encounter a similar conversation every week, that somebody feels regret or shame or blames themselves over choices they made from a limited place when they were younger, and the quote unquote damage that occurred. And I want to bring that to light using this lens of leaving a spiritual legacy, because the Kabbalists teach, and we've spoken about it many times before, that there is greater miracles, greater light in those situations that were dark and that we transformed, rather than in those situations that are perfect and fun and joyful without lack, without compromise. And so I think it's also important to recognize, first of all, that nothing is irreparable. When you understand that only 1% of it is physical, nothing can't be changed. And at the same time, in those moments that things look dark and we can transform it, or we're angry and we're able to shift out of it, or where our tendency is to feel that shame and that blame, and we're able to open up and be vulnerable, that's what creates what David was saying before, the opportunity to create miracles. It's not when things are perfect and fun and everything's easy. It's actually the struggle that we say that the greater the concealment, the greater that it seems there isn't light in the situation, the more light is actually waiting to be revealed.
Give examples.
Well, again, my mind goes to...
People do well with examples.
My mind goes to cinematic examples always. You went to the FBI, scenes. To me, our favorite stories in movies, in TV and whatnot, in books, is the ones where the hero was so locked in an impossible situation, dark, down, penniless, no hope. And somehow they surmount, they rise above. And maybe I've shared this example before in the podcast, a very real life example. I knew somebody years ago, and we're talking more than 20 years ago. I remember because we had kids at the same time. And when we were both pregnant with our now 21-year-old child, her husband left her. She was pregnant, 7 months pregnant. She had two kids, 23 and 25, or they're now 23 and 25. Her
so
husband...
2 and 4, and then she was pregnant with
And she was pregnant with the third.
And the husband left her why?
For another
pregnant woman?
Another woman.
Okay.
And my goodness, like that was like watching...
Was that a surprise to her?
It was. It was a surprise to all of us, let's say. They're very sweet and loving and young and beautiful, like everything.
How old are they?
In their 20s. I would say late 20s, probably, mid to late 20s. And guess what? She got the news, she was 7 months pregnant, that her husband is leaving her for someone else that he met while he was on business or whatever. And it was gut-wrenching is not the word. Yeah. Like imagine she gives birth, she has this beautiful baby boy, the whole thing, and everybody, it's like the most amazing thing and also so painful. And I think I've shared before, obviously it was difficult and there was nothing to do but surrender for her in that case. Like I can't even imagine. And I don't want to say within minutes, but it definitely felt like within minutes, her then ex-husband's best friend swooped her up off her feet, made her family his family. They got married. I mean, it was just beautiful. Like, could any of us have ever predicted it or seen it coming? Absolutely not. Was the first 6 months, I think, the most gut-wrenching, grueling, painful. I mean, it didn't even happen to us and we were in shock and reeling for months, right?
So did it happen 6 months after?
I would say that he was in their lives.
Sure.
But I think the redemption began probably 6 to 9 months after.
And what would you say her conscience? Because I think people hear the story and they go, definitely not something I want to go through, but I've been through maybe similar painful things. What do I need to do during those 6 months? She doesn't know the redemption is coming.
She definitely
she's looking down into an abyss of pain, suffering, and loneliness, right? What man's going to want to be with her now with 3 young children, a divorcee, all this, all that. But what did she do, spiritually speaking, and what can we all do planting seeds of consciousness in those very difficult and painful times? I think we're all looking for case studies. We're all looking for case studies of what has worked. And then we glean from that practical spiritual examples that we can apply.
For sure. So if I had to narrow it down to a handful of answers to that, how did she, what was the formula?
One proactive thing you remembered that she did during this very difficult time?
I'll start with the most obvious one to me is that she asked for help.
You mean from the creator or from people?
So I visibly saw it from people that I looked at her and I said, my goodness, I would just hole up in a cave and never want to come out again if I were her. And that definitely wasn't my highest self responding. But because I was in a sort of similar situation, pregnant, 2 small kids, I thought to myself, could there be couldn't he have kept it under wraps a little bit longer? And then of course I saw the side where the sooner he comes out with it, the better. Everybody can move on. But it was so painful. But she let people be a part of her process, which goes back to what I said before about vulnerability, right? That there is that's the funny thing, is that we want to see vulnerability from people. We are drawn to people who are vulnerable, yet we ourselves don't want to be vulnerable. She was vulnerable. She let people in. She asked for help. And I imagine internally, I can tell you what I did see from her from a spiritual point of view. I imagine that required also internal asking the creator constantly for, what the heck am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to handle this? So that's actually the third thing I thought of, that vulnerability and that asking for help. The first 2 things that came to my mind when you asked the question was, she surrendered, meaning she just basically said, okay, this is happening. I just have to accept it, and creator, I'm open to whatever this is supposed to do. I definitely don't want to stay with somebody who doesn't want to be with me and doesn't want to take care of my kids with me. But it was a huge surrender. And then the other thing was humility. And the humility part, I also related to, because a number of years later, I went through a divorce myself. And it was really hard for me to show it. Like, I felt like I messed up, and I don't want anybody to see that I messed up. And I don't want that to make anybody think any less of me or my family or the Kabbalah Centre or anything else.
Yeah. So let's unpack that. Basically, and this is a great lesson for all of us. We've all made mistakes, and those mistakes then kind of progress into some kind of painful, chaotic situation. We will tend to keep that close to us and private because of the embarrassment that it could cause. And we let ourselves down, we let other people down, we let people who trusted us down. That's a very difficult thing. And you're saying here what she did, is slowly, it sounds like, involve other people in the process and be okay with the humiliation and the embarrassment. And part of it is, my assumption is that other people it's all just in our head.
100%.
It's all just in our head. So we're all trying to look perfect.
So that's that again brings that aspect of, if I really want my energy to be impactful, both in my own life and out there, I cannot be busy putting energy out on managing my PR.
Yeah.
Do people see it? Do people know what's going on? Do they know the whole story? And there's the phrase, if you don't tell your story, people will make it up. Right? That's part of I think when we look at the people who've made a difference in our lives and in the world, they've brought us into their story. They're not busy faking it or fabricating it. That's the word, not faking it, fabricating it. They bring us into their lives, right? There's so many stories of people who went through, I was just listening to something this morning about somebody, a celebrity or something, who had a healing health issue and brought everybody into it with them, rather than, there's some celebrities, and I'm just using celebrities as an example because there's a public image to manage there, that there's some celebrities that disappear for 6 months and then afterwards say they went through something.
That's right.
There's other people that bring cameras into the doctor's office with them.
That's right.
So which ones are we drawn to the most? Of course, we feel compassion and empathy for everybody. But when people draw us into their story, we're much more inclined to connect, but also learn from it. And that's one of the things. I mean, listen, this is a story that took place 22 years ago, and I'm still talking about it. I learned and grew so much from her openness, from her humbleness, from her surrendering, it was like she was standing naked in front of 200 people. I mean, she wasn't, but she couldn't hide it. It happened like literally in one of the most communal moments of her life. And there we all were able to be there for her. And she embraced it. And she said, I'm a human being. Obviously, I have to grow and learn. I need help. It takes a village. It took a village. And the last time I saw her, she was much happier than I ever knew her before.
Well, yeah, I think now I want to extrapolate a practical takeaway for all of us. And that is, we spoke earlier about seeing into the future to see what we're going to go through and how to deal with that. And that is possible. You need to believe in that. You need to believe that you can get tipped off and the type of challenges that are going to come. And part of that means tapping into your intuitive side. Part of that means silencing your mind and talking with the Creator and seeing what comes and then trusting what comes and acting upon it. And there's a whole probably session we can do on that. And it has a lot to do with divine inspiration and tapping into the tree of life where all the information exists. The other thing that we're talking about that Elisha brought up and is a practical takeaway for all of us is as soon as you're going through a challenge, I've noticed that when somebody reaches out to me and just tells me what's going on, even if they're not looking for a response or an answer, but just energetically gets someone that loves them involved energetically, you automatically open the doors to an answer, a solution, and mercy. And when you hold it close to your chest and try to figure it all out yourself, there's this concept in Kabbalah that the Shekhinah, which is the aspect of the light of the Creator, which is more closely in our world, it's called the Shekhinah. This energy comes down as soon as two people are involved. And this is true of maybe having a podcast with two people also draws it down. It says that when two people study from holy writings together, as opposed to when they study by themselves, this energy comes down. And so it's 1 + 1 = 8, as opposed to 2. And so when you're going through a painful process, obviously not from a place of taking energy from someone or being reactive, but involving someone who loves you, someone who maybe has a higher consciousness than you into the process, immediately you bring yourself to and I'm going to make this up. I just realized practically, I've been dealing with a question in my mind, a struggle personally. And I realized, I was getting people involved in the process as well, but I still was having a big challenge with it until I finally realized I need to reach out to someone who actually has gone through the exact same thing. Or I consider this person of a person who's many steps ahead of me in this problem that I've had. And it took literally 5-6 minutes for me to talk to him and for him to open the gates of understanding for me. And I talked to many other smart people, but no one had actually gone through this. So I attribute the opening to me, opening myself up to someone who had a higher consciousness as a result of going through the same thing. So I would also recommend that for everything. It's amazing how people make the biggest decisions of their lives, whether that's proactively to do something or dealing with something painful, without consulting other people who have gone through this, or spiritual teachers or mentors. It's baffling, the way people make decisions. Imagine you're about to propose to someone or you're about to get engaged. How many, what to do, how to do it, if it's the right person, is it too soon, is it too late? These are questions. I notice people first do and then they ask questions later. And often most people don't want to hear what to do, so they don't open themselves up to it. But you also have to realize that your ego is very strong and your negative side is very strong. And it could be fooling you at any moment. On one hand, you need to have certainty and move forward and not question yourself too much. On the other hand, you need to know that you have a blind spot and it needs to be acknowledged. You need to acknowledge your blind spot. And it's hard. It's a hard thing because you also don't want to over-question yourself to the point where you're immobilized and paralyzed. You don't do anything. Because I know that's another correction people have with their soul. So it's both. It's move ahead, move forward strong with a blind spot. Knowing you have a blind spot, asking for people for help, especially people of higher consciousness, so you can see your blind spots at this speed, at this momentum. Any final words before we wrap up?
Well, no,
for this week?
I want to just take everything that we said and bring it into, we started talking about what it means to leave a spiritual legacy. And I feel like if you, I'm sure that people saw the title or started listening and said, how can I even think of a spiritual legacy with all that I have going on in my life? Or I've got this, I've got that going on, or I'm not where I feel like I'm supposed to be in my life right now. So how can I even aim to make a difference? How can I even, right, dealing with this chaos or that challenge? You want me to think about what kind of legacy I'm going to leave behind? The fact of the matter is you are leaving a legacy, a spiritual legacy behind you. Our teacher, Karen Berg, used to say, people think, well, if I can accumulate enough, I'll be happy. If I can amass enough wealth and possessions, but no one gets to take any of that with them. What really lasts is the energy that you put out there. So using the example of the woman that I shared with, she left an indelible mark on so many of our lives just because of how she handled that situation. Let's go into the coming week thinking about what energy I'm bringing to the table. I know it's a really funny story. I'll end with this as a very practical example to David's point. I got a flat tire this morning. And I know that whenever we're about to record an episode and something happens to me, I know it's for the episode at hand. I got a flat tire this morning. I didn't even know. I pulled up to drop off my kids at school, and the security guard at the school said, hey, I think you have a flat tire. Go to this and this place. He'll fix it for you. So I got there. Place was closed. Okay, so I just pulled up to the air pump. I got my wallet out. I was going to put in the $2. And the guy rolls up the window of the car repair, and he says, bring the car, pull in over here. And he fixes it for me. And I told him, God bless you. Like he was a total angel, right? And I looked at him really with these eyes of like, you dropped out of the sky. You saved me. I've got to run to do this podcast. And, I can't be late, whatever. It was just this like heavenly, the angels singing, the clouds parted. And I told him, God bless you. And he looked at me like no one had ever said something like that to him, that he should be blessed. And it's exactly those moments that now that man for the next day or however long it lasts him, he's going to be in a little bit of awe or whatever impression he had from his interaction with me the 10 minutes this morning. How can we leave more of those impressions? And I don't mean you need to walk around the world saying, God bless you, right? I don't normally say that to people. It just, that's really what I felt. I said it to him. I blessed him. And that is the spiritual legacy we're talking about. Being vulnerable and opening up to have people be a part of your process. That's more impactful than anything you think you're doing with, you're cleaning out your closet or creating a nonprofit or writing a book. Your energy matters so much more than your physical actions. And when you're aware of that, your physical actions will carry that energy as well. Weekly Energy Boost is available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We also have a website, weeklyenergyboost.com, where you can find our archives and read about the things we think are interesting and important for our listeners to know about. You can also click the donate page and help support our podcast. But as always, the greatest support you can give us is by sharing this episode, by sharing every episode that inspires you and help us to inspire even more people. Have a fabulous week, and we'll see you next time on the Weekly Energy Boost.